The rain had started just minutes before Ethan pulled into the gravel parking lot of Maggie's Grill, a place he'd never stepped foot in before tonight. Natalie sat beside him in the passenger seat, cheeks pink from laughing at one of her own jokes. She was beautiful, glowing in a casual kind of way. That was one of the things he liked most about her. She didn't need to try. "This place looks cozy," she said, pulling her hood over her hair as she opened the car door. "Yeah," Ethan replied, distracted, glancing at the diner through the fogged-up windshield. "Old school." She laughed. "Exactly. You need a little old school. All your restaurants are too perfect. Too quiet. I like places where people yell orders across the kitchen and the fries are always a little too salty." He smiled at her, or tried to. His mind was still on work. The stock deal he'd closed earlier that day. The investor dinner he'd skipped for this date. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he ignored it. He didn't want to be that guy tonight. The one who couldn't switch off. They stepped inside the diner, and it was exactly like she'd hoped: faded red booths, sticky menus, a jukebox that probably hadn't worked since the 90s, and a single tired-looking waitress pouring coffee for a trucker at the end of the counter. And then he saw her. No warning. No preparation. Just bam, like being punched in the chest. Sophie. His ex-wife. She was behind the counter, wiping it down with slow, tired movements. Her hair was longer than he remembered, but the same deep brown. She looked thinner, paler, older somehow, but it was her. And she was pregnant. Very pregnant. Ethan froze mid-step. His body literally stopped moving. He felt the heat drain from his face, his hands go cold. Sophie looked up, her eyes met his, and in that moment, it was like time stood still. For a beat, they just stared at each other. Her eyes widened, then quickly narrowed. But she didn't look surprised. No. She looked terrified. Then, without a word, she turned and disappeared into the kitchen. Natalie hadn't noticed a thing. She was still looking at the jukebox, complaining gently about how it was always the cool-looking things that never worked anymore. He nodded numbly, still staring at the door Sophie had walked through. It didn't make sense. Sophie had disappeared 3 years ago. No trace. After the divorce, she'd left New York. Her apartment had been cleaned out. She didn't take alimony. She didn't answer calls. Her social media vanished. Not even her friends knew where she went. It was like she fell off the planet. And now, here she was, working in a backwoods diner in some nowhere town, serving coffee and visibly pregnant. He had so many questions, none of them made sense. Was she okay? Whose baby was that? Why was she hiding? And why did she look like she didn't want to be found? Natalie pulled him by the arm to a booth. He sat stiffly, barely hearing her talk about the milkshakes on the menu or the weird smell of onions in the air. He just kept staring toward the kitchen, heart pounding in his chest. Then, she came back. Sophie emerged from the kitchen with a notepad in hand and a look that could cut glass. She walked slowly toward their booth, her stomach unmistakably round now that she wasn't hiding behind the counter. Ethan tried to read her expression, but it gave away nothing, no warmth, no recognition, just exhaustion, and maybe fear. "What can I get you?" she asked, eyes fixed on the notepad. Natalie smiled. "Hi. I'll do the cheeseburger and fries. And a chocolate shake." Ethan didn't speak. He couldn't. Sophie slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. Natalie noticed the silence and glanced at him. "You okay?" Ethan blinked. Yeah, I'll have the same." Sophie scribbled something down. "Coming right up." And just like that, she turned and walked away again. Natalie chuckled once she was out of earshot. She looked like she's had the worst day ever. Poor thing. Ethan nodded stiffly, staring after Sophie. He wanted to get up. He wanted to follow her. He wanted answers. But something in her eyes stopped him. That look, the quiet plea not to say anything, it kept him glued to his seat. 15 minutes later. The food came. It was decent. Fries too salty, just like Natalie wanted. But Ethan couldn't eat. His brain wouldn't shut off. The memories flooded in, their wedding day, the way Sophie used to laugh at his terrible cooking, the long nights talking about dreams and kids and buying a cabin somewhere far away. And then, the slow unraveling. The distance. The fights. Her quiet withdrawal. The tears. The silence. And then, she was gone. But even after everything, he never thought she was suffering. He thought maybe she'd started over somewhere better. Maybe she was happier. That's what he told himself. But seeing her here, pregnant, exhausted, working in a place like this, shattered all of that. And why hadn't she said anything? Why now? Later that night. Back in the car, Natalie leaned back with her milkshake and said, "That was fun. Let's do weird diners more often." "Yeah," Ethan replied, distracted. "You okay?" she asked again, watching him carefully. "Yeah," he lied. When he got home, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. At 2:47 a.m., he sat up and opened his laptop. He searched for her, again. Social media, old contacts, mutual friends. Nothing new. At 3:12 a.m., he found the diner's number on a local business site. He stared at it for 20 minutes. And then he dialed. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Maggie's," said a tired voice. A man's voice. "Hi, is Sophie working tonight?" Ethan asked. There was a pause. "No one by that name here, sir," the voice replied curtly. "But she was working earlier tonight. Dark hair, pregnant." "Wrong number," the voice said, and the line went dead. Ethan sat there, staring at the screen. Something was wrong. He felt it deep in his bones. And whatever it was, it started tonight. The next morning. He returned to the diner. Alone. When he walked in, the same waitress from the night before, not Sophie, was pouring coffee for the same trucker. "Hey," he said cautiously. "I was here last night, there was a woman working here. Dark hair. Pregnant?" The waitress frowned. "You mean Maggie?" "No, not Maggie. Her name's Sophie." "There's no Sophie here," the woman said. "You sure it was here?" Ethan blinked. "Yes. I sat right over there." He pointed at the booth. The woman shook her head. "You're mistaken, hon, only me and Dave work here these days. No one else. Not for months." Ethan felt a chill run through his spine. "I'm telling you," he said quietly, "I saw her." The woman shrugged. "Then maybe you saw a ghost." Millionaire's date night turns shocking when he meets his pregnant ex. Word count goal, 2,000 plus words. Ethan sat in his car across the street from Maggie's Grill for almost an hour. The waitress had said no one named Sophie worked there. Had she been lying? Protecting her? Or was it possible that Sophie really hadn't worked there at all? No. He knew what he saw. He wasn't hallucinating. That was Sophie, same voice, same eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly when she held the notepad. It was her. And she was pregnant. He checked his watch. It was only 9:15 a.m. The same cars from the night before were still there, the dented red truck with the broken taillight, the green station wagon with the bumper stickers. Small town. Not much traffic. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. Ethan took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked toward the diner again, this time not as a customer, but as a man looking for the truth. Inside the diner. The bell above the door jingled. The same waitress from earlier looked up from wiping the counter. Her expression tightened. "You again," she said. "I need to know what's going on," Ethan replied calmly. "I saw Sophie here last night. She waited on me and my girlfriend." The woman crossed her arms. "Like I said, you're mistaken." "I'm not," he said, firmer this time. "She's my ex-wife. She disappeared 3 years ago. And last night, she took our order. She was wearing a blue apron, her hair was in a bun, and she was visibly pregnant." The waitress blinked, surprised. Ethan could tell she hadn't expected that much detail. "She's not supposed to be here," the woman muttered under her breath. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean by that?" "I didn't say anything," she snapped, then glanced toward the kitchen. "Look, you should go. You being here isn't safe for her." That stopped him cold. "Safe?" he repeated. "Is someone after her?" She didn't answer. "Please," he said, stepping closer. "Just tell me what's going on. Is she okay? Whose baby is she carrying? Why is she working here? Did she leave on purpose?" The waitress hesitated. Then, quietly, she said, "If you care about her, leave. You finding her again? That's going to put her in more danger than you know." Before he could ask another question, she turned and walked into the back. The booth. Ethan walked over to the same booth he and Natalie had sat in the night before. The seat was still a little sticky. The same ketchup stain was on the corner of the table. For a second, it felt like he had stepped back in time, like he could almost see Sophie standing there again, staring at him with that haunted look. He sat down, trying to process it all. The waitress was hiding something. That was obvious. But why? What danger? What secret? As he reached to wipe his hand across the table, his fingers brushed something sharp beneath the edge of the napkin holder. He pulled it out. A folded piece of paper. Small. Torn at the edges. His name was written on the outside. Ethan. His heart jumped. Hands trembling, he unfolded the note. Inside, in Sophie's handwriting, unmistakable, delicate, slanted slightly to the left, were 5 words. "Don't look for me. Please." He stared at the note. Every part of him screamed to ignore it. But he couldn't. Because if she didn't want to be found, why leave a note at all? And why write his name? It was a message. A cry for help disguised as a warning. And he wasn't going to walk away now. That evening, Ethan checked into a small roadside motel a few miles away. Not the kind of place he was used to, flickering lights, a front desk clerk who barely looked up, a room that smelled like dust and old carpet. But he needed to stay close. If Sophie was here, he was going to find out why. And what, or who, she was running from. He laid the note on the nightstand and stared at it for hours. Don't look for me. But she knew he would. That's why she left it. The next day, he drove to the library in town. A place like this didn't have much: one computer, 2 dusty bookshelves, and a sleepy-looking librarian who perked up when he asked for public records. Looking for someone? She asked. Yes. Sophie Keller. She might have gone by a different name. I think she's been living around here. The librarian tilted her head. Keller, doesn't ring a bell. But if she worked locally, she might be in some payroll records or town permits. She showed him the system, and for the next 3 hours, Ethan dug. Then he found it. A temporary work permit issued 6 months ago under the name Sarah Kent. No address listed. Just a P.O. box and a signature. But the signature, even though it had been deliberately messy, he recognized it. It was Sophie. He printed the file. If she was using a fake name, she had good reason. And he was starting to realize, maybe this wasn't just about her running from a failed marriage. Maybe she was running from something bigger. That night, he went back to the diner, but it was closed. No lights. No cars. Nothing. It looked abandoned. He peered through the window. The tables were still set. Cups still stacked. But no sign of anyone. He turned to leave, then stopped. Something glinted in the alley behind the diner. A figure. He ducked behind the trash bins and watched. A woman emerged through the back door. She moved slowly, hand on her belly, carrying a small duffel bag. Sophie. He held his breath. She looked around nervously, then walked toward the end of the alley, where an old sedan was parked. Ethan stepped out. "Sophie," he said softly. She froze. Turned slowly. Her eyes filled with tears the second she saw him. But she didn't smile. Instead, she said, "You shouldn't have come." Sophie's gaze pierced through Ethan, but it wasn't the look of a woman who was glad to see him. Her eyes were filled with dread, as if his presence here had triggered a chain of events she couldn't control. She wasn't smiling, wasn't even acknowledging the reunion, she was just looking at him, pleading without words for him to leave. "You shouldn't have come," she repeated, her voice low and shaky. Ethan didn't move. He couldn't. His heart was pounding, and for a moment, he was speechless. Seeing Sophie again was a whirlwind, but seeing her like this, on the run, so obviously frightened, was something he wasn't prepared for. "Sophie," he whispered, taking a cautious step forward. "What's going on? Why are you hiding? Why didn't you come back? I've been looking for you for years." She shook her head, her shoulders slumping in exhaustion. "I didn't have a choice, Ethan. I never wanted to leave you, but I couldn't stay. You don't understand what's happening. You never will." Ethan stepped closer, his voice urgent. "I can understand. I can help you. Whatever it is, just tell me." Sophie's eyes welled up with tears, and she wiped them quickly with the back of her hand, trying to maintain control. "No, you can't. You don't know what I've done. Or who I've been running from." Her words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean? What have you done?" Sophie's breath hitched as she swallowed, glancing at the car parked at the end of the alley. She seemed to hesitate, caught in a moment of indecision, before she spoke again. "I should have never gotten involved with him. I was so stupid. I thought I could escape it. I didn't know where else to go." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you talking about?" Sophie's face paled, and she looked over her shoulder as if checking to make sure no one was listening. "He's dangerous, Ethan. The kind of man you don't want to get mixed up with. If he finds out you're involved, he'll hurt you too." The words hit Ethan like a blast of cold air. "Who is he? Why do you think he'll hurt me?" Sophie took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she fought to steady herself. "His name is Marcus. He's a powerful man, connected to things I shouldn't have ever gotten involved with. When I realized what I was in, it was too late to get out. He owns a lot of people, Ethan. And I was one of them." Ethan felt his stomach drop. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but they didn't make sense. Sophie had never shown any sign of being involved in anything dangerous. The woman he married was always the one who loved books, quiet nights at home, dreams of starting a family. She never talked about dangerous men or shady dealings. "I don't understand," Ethan said, his voice strained. "You were happy when we were together. I thought everything was fine. Why would you? I didn't want you to be part of it. Sophie cut him off, her voice growing more frantic. That's why I left. I didn't want you to get dragged into something that would destroy you. If I'd stayed, he would have used you against me. You were the only good thing in my life, Ethan. And I couldn't let him take that from me. The weight of her words settled heavily on his chest. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he loved, had been living a life he couldn't have imagined. And now, she was pregnant, and it was clear she wasn't just running from her past, she was trying to protect him too. Sophie took a deep breath, and her eyes softened, the tears still threatening to spill over. I couldn't stay with you because I was terrified that he'd hurt you if he found out. But now I don't know what to do. I'm so close to breaking, Ethan. I need to get away from him before it's too late. Ethan was still reeling from everything she'd just shared. His mind raced as he tried to piece together what was happening. Sophie, the woman who had disappeared from his life without a trace, had been living in fear of a man he knew nothing about. And now she was pregnant with his child, desperately trying to escape a life he never knew existed. Marcus, Ethan said, the name hanging heavy in the air. Where is he? Is he here? What does he want with you? Sophie shook her head slowly, her expression hardening. I don't know where he is. But I know he's watching me. He always has eyes on me, even when I thought I was safe. He'll find me again. And when he does, I'll have nowhere to run. Ethan felt his blood run cold. The danger Sophie was in was real, and it wasn't just her life at stake. It was his too. Is he the father of the baby? Ethan asked softly, his voice almost a whisper. Sophie hesitated, the question clearly weighing on her. No, she said finally, her voice barely audible. But I think he might be. I don't know what to believe anymore. Ethan reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he touched her arm. You don't have to go through this alone. I'll help you. We can figure this out together. Sophie's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, the tension in her body seemed to ease. But it was only for a moment. She quickly pulled away, her expression hardening again. No, Ethan. I've already put you in danger by just talking to you. I can't drag you any further into this. But I'm already in this, Sophie, Ethan said, his voice growing more urgent. I'm not going to walk away and pretend I didn't see you again. I'm here because I care about you. You don't get to decide this for me. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. Sophie's face softened, but her fear was still evident. She looked back at the car parked at the end of the alley, her eyes flickering nervously. Please, she said in a strained voice. You don't know what he's capable of. I'm begging you, go back to your life. Forget about me. It's too late for me. Ethan grabbed her arm gently but firmly, his grip steady. I can't forget about you, Sophie. I'm not going to leave you to fight this battle on your own. Whatever Marcus is, whoever he is, I'm in this now. We'll fight this together. Sophie looked at him for a long moment, her expression conflicted. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. But you need to understand something. This isn't just about me. It's about you too. Marcus won't stop. If he wants something, he'll stop at nothing to get it. And now, with you involved, there's no going back. Ethan nodded, his resolve firming up. I'm ready. We'll get through this. Together. But as Sophie looked at him, there was no smile. Only fear. A fear that told him the worst was still to come. And even though they were standing in an alleyway, face to face for the first time in years, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a sense of urgency that kept him from getting any rest. Sophie's words echoed in his mind. Marcus. Dangerous. Powerful. Someone who had control over her life in ways he couldn't even comprehend. He couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie was right. Marcus wasn't just someone from her past. He was a shadow that loomed over everything, a constant presence. Ethan knew he had to help her, but he also knew that whatever happened next would change everything. Sophie was in danger. And so was he. The next day, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Sophie's face from the alley. Her eyes, wide with fear, had haunted him all night. But it wasn't just the fear that unsettled him, it was the way she had pulled away when he tried to hold her, the way she had looked at him as though she knew the worst was yet to come. There was something deeper, something Sophie was holding back. She'd hinted at it, but never fully explained. Who was Marcus? What kind of man could make Sophie so terrified, to the point of leaving everything behind? Ethan knew he couldn't wait any longer. If Sophie wasn't going to trust him with the whole story, he'd have to find out for himself. The search begins. The next morning, Ethan was already in his car, driving down roads he hadn't taken in years. He had made a decision, and the choice wasn't going to be easy. He had to find Marcus. If Sophie wouldn't speak, then the only way to learn more was through action. Sophie had said Marcus was dangerous. Powerful. Ethan wasn't sure what that meant yet, but he had to be ready for whatever came next. He pulled into a small coffee shop at the edge of town, a place known for its late hours and shady clientele. If Marcus had ties here, this was the place to start. He parked and walked inside, the bell above the door jingling softly as he entered. The familiar smell of brewed coffee filled the air, mixing with the quiet hum of conversation. But no one seemed to take much notice of him as he ordered a coffee and took a seat in the corner. The place was darker than most, but that was exactly what Ethan needed. It wasn't long before he caught sight of someone familiar, the waitress from the diner. She was sitting at a table near the back, talking to a man Ethan didn't recognize. The man's face was partially obscured by the shadows, but something about him, his posture, the way he kept his hands in his lap, screamed power. Ethan took a deep breath. The waitress had seen him, but she didn't acknowledge his presence. It was clear that she didn't want to get involved any further, but Ethan wasn't about to back down now. He needed answers. He stood up, walked casually toward her, and took a seat across from her before she could stop him. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly masked it with a neutral expression. "How can I help you?" she asked, her voice tight with unease. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Ethan said, leaning in slightly. "But I need to know who Marcus is." She froze, her hands gripping her coffee cup a little too tightly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice low but urgent. "You do," Ethan pressed. "I saw you last night. You know something about him. I just need to understand who he is, why he's after Sophie. Please. Help me." The waitress looked around nervously, then lowered her voice even further. "Marcus isn't someone you want to get involved with. He's dangerous, Ethan. I'm not just talking about physical threats. He's got people everywhere. He controls everything around here, even the police. If he finds out you're asking questions, I don't know what he'll do to you, or Sophie." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a regular man. This was someone who had his claws in everything. Someone who owned not just money or power, but control. "I need to know more," Ethan insisted. "Where does he hang out? How can I find him?" The waitress hesitated, clearly debating whether or not to continue. Finally, she sighed. "I don't know where he is, but I know who can help you find him." Ethan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Who?" She gave him a sharp look, warning him. "A man named Ray. He's connected to Marcus. But Ray's not like the others. If you can find him, he might be able to help. But be careful. Ray's not a good guy either. He's just more willing to talk. Where can I find him?" Ethan asked. The waitress glanced over her shoulder before leaning in close. Ray works out of a place called the Black Hole. It's an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. But like I said, be careful. You don't know what you're getting into. The Black Hole. The name alone sent a shiver through Ethan. The Black Hole? He had heard rumors about the place, an abandoned warehouse that no one dared enter, and for good reason. It was a den of crime, a place where people disappeared, never to be seen again. If Marcus was involved there, things were more complicated than he had realized. Ethan followed the directions the waitress had given him, the car's tires crunching over the dirt road as he approached the warehouse. The area was deserted, a few scattered cars parked haphazardly outside, most of them unmarked, but one stood out. A sleek black sports car, parked a little too carefully to be a coincidence. He parked down the street, out of sight, and approached on foot. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and imposing, its steel walls grimy and covered in graffiti. A flickering light in the corner caught his attention, and as he neared the entrance, the heavy metal door opened with a loud screech. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark sunglasses despite the dim light. He looked like he belonged to a different world, a world Ethan was only beginning to understand. "You looking for someone?" the man asked gruffly, his voice carrying an edge of warning. "I'm looking for Ray," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the tension rising in his chest. The man raised an eyebrow. "Ray doesn't meet with people like you." Ethan didn't back down. "I think he will. Tell him Ethan's here." There was a long silence, and then the man stepped aside, allowing Ethan to enter. Inside, the warehouse was even darker, lit only by a few bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling. The space was empty except for a few scattered crates and tables. And there, sitting at one of the tables, was Ray. Ray didn't look like the typical thug. He was lean, with a sharp jaw and dark, calculating eyes. He was dressed in a suit, not the kind you'd wear to a board meeting, but the kind you'd wear if you were about to get your hands dirty. "Ray," Ethan said, walking toward him. "I need information about Marcus. I need to know everything." Ray studied him for a moment before leaning back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the table. "You must be pretty desperate to come here, asking about Marcus. He's not someone you want to mess with." "I'm not asking for trouble," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I'm trying to help Sophie. She's in danger, and I don't know where else to turn." Ray chuckled, a dark and humorless sound. "You really don't know what you're getting into, do you?" "I know enough," Ethan shot back. "But I need you to fill in the blanks. Who is Marcus? Why is he after Sophie?" Ray's eyes flickered, and for a brief second, Ethan saw something in them, a flash of something personal, something deeper than just business. But it was gone before he could analyze it. "All right," Ray said finally. "I'll tell you what you need to know. But you need to understand that once you're in, there's no way out." Ray's dark revelation. Ray's office inside the warehouse was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the room. Ethan sat at the edge of a steel table, his heart racing as he waited for Ray to speak. The weight of everything Sophie had told him, and the dangers she had warned him about, now felt far too real. The walls around him felt like they were closing in, each second amplifying the tension. Ethan wasn't sure what to expect from Ray, but the man had already proven to be unpredictable. He had to be careful. Sophie's life, and his own, could be on the line. Ray leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepling in front of his face, eyes flickering with a mix of amusement and something darker. He'd been sizing Ethan up ever since the millionaire had walked into the warehouse, and Ethan had no doubt that the man had already made a decision about what role he would play in all of this. "So, you want to know about Marcus," Ray said, his voice low and almost contemplative. "You've been asking the right questions, but the wrong person." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I'm not here for games. I need answers." Sophie's pregnant, and she's terrified. I don't care who Marcus is, I just need to know what he wants from her. Ray's eyes narrowed as he took in Ethan's words. There was no hesitation now. He could see that Ethan wasn't just another wealthy, naive man. There was a burning intensity behind Ethan's gaze, something raw, something that made him stand a little straighter. All right, Ray said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. You're not wrong to be worried, but you should have stayed out of it. You've already crossed a line, and once you cross that line with Marcus, there's no going back. Ethan leaned forward, hands clenched tightly on the edge of the table. I don't care. I won't let her go through this alone. You said you could help me find him. Now, I need you to tell me everything. Ray studied him for a moment before speaking again. Marcus isn't just some criminal, he's the leader of a network, a web of businesses that extend far beyond what you're thinking. He controls everything in this town, and not just the obvious stuff like money or drugs. He owns people, Ethan. He owns their lives. Ethan's stomach tightened. He'd already known that Marcus wasn't a regular man, but hearing Ray's words brought the danger into sharp focus. This was more than just a business empire, it was something darker, something far more insidious. People? Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. What do you mean? What's he doing to them? Ray took a deep breath, shifting in his chair. He doesn't just take people's lives. Ethan. He controls them. He's like a puppet master. He uses their weaknesses, their desires, their fears, and turns them into slaves, in every sense of the word. Whether it's through fear, manipulation, or blackmail, Marcus always wins. Ethan's mind spun. He had heard of powerful figures in the underworld, but this was something entirely different. It wasn't just about money or control, it was about owning people, about shaping their very existence until they had no choice but to serve. But what about Sophie? Ethan asked, his voice trembling. How does she fit into this? What does Marcus want from her? Ray's expression darkened, his jaw tightening as he glanced away for a moment. Sophie was never meant to be part of this world. She was an innocent in all of this. But Marcus saw something in her, something valuable. Ethan leaned forward, his mind racing. Valuable? What do you mean? Ray didn't answer right away. He was choosing his words carefully, weighing how much to say. Finally, he spoke. Marcus doesn't just want to control people. He wants to break them. And he had plans for Sophie, big plans. She was meant to be a part of his business, whether she liked it or not. But she ran. She disappeared before he could tie her down. That's why he's been looking for her all this time. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they didn't make sense. Sophie had left Marcus, and now she was hiding from him, pregnant and terrified. But why was Marcus still after her? What had she done that made her so important to him? Ray's voice interrupted his thoughts. Sophie knew something, Ethan. Something that would have changed everything. And once she realized it, she ran. But not fast enough. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. What did she know? Ray hesitated again. It was clear that he was dancing around the truth, not wanting to reveal too much. Finally, he spoke. Sophie knew that Marcus had been involved in something bigger, something illegal, much bigger than anything she could have imagined. She had stumbled upon it by accident, but that was enough for Marcus to make sure she couldn't walk away. He couldn't afford to let her go, not with the information she had. Ethan's mind raced. And the baby? How does that fit into all of this? Ray's eyes flickered briefly with something unreadable before he looked down at the table. The baby complicates things. Sophie's been hiding for months, but Marcus isn't stupid. He knows about the baby now, and that means he has a new way of controlling her. Ethan felt his blood run cold. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He's using the baby as leverage. Ray nodded grimly. Exactly. And once Marcus gets what he wants, he'll get rid of her. He doesn't keep people around once they've served their purpose. The room felt suffocating as Ethan processed everything Ray had just told him. Marcus wasn't just hunting Sophie because she had run. He was hunting her because she knew too much. And now, with the baby on the way, Marcus had a new way to bind her to him. A dangerous decision. Ethan stood up abruptly, his heart racing. The urge to act, to do something, anything, overwhelmed him. Sophie was running out of time. He didn't have the luxury of waiting around any longer. I need to find her, Ethan said, his voice low but determined. Now. Where is she? Ray didn't answer immediately. Instead, he regarded Ethan with a calculating look, his hands clasped in front of him. You want to find her? You want to save her? Ethan nodded, his jaw set. Yes. Ray's lips twisted into a grim smile. Then you'll have to deal with Marcus first. Ethan's eyes hardened. I'm not backing down. I'll do whatever it takes to save her. Ray's smile faded. You think you're ready for that? Marcus won't hesitate to kill you, Ethan. He's got eyes everywhere. You won't even see it coming. Ethan's voice was steady, unwavering. Then I'll be ready. Ray leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. All right. But just remember, once you step into Marcus's world, there's no turning back. You'll be marked for life. Ethan didn't hesitate. I'll take that risk. Ray nodded slowly, then stood up. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Either way, good luck. The final move. Ethan left the warehouse feeling more resolute than ever. The fear that had clung to him before had transformed into something else, a driving force. He would find Sophie, no matter the cost. But he had one more thing to do. The black hole wasn't just a hideout. It was Marcus's base of operations. And it was time for Ethan to take the fight to him. As he stepped into his car and drove off, the weight of what lay ahead didn't escape him. He didn't know exactly what Marcus had planned, but he knew one thing for sure, it was time to end this. Once and for all. The black hole. Ethan couldn't breathe. His pulse hammered in his ears as he approached the worn, imposing gates of the black hole. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Marcus would either crumble under the weight of his secrets, or Ethan would be left fighting for his life, and Sophie's, against the shadows that had threatened to swallow them both. As Ethan's car rolled past the grimy, graffiti-covered exterior, the ominous silence of the night closed in around him. The warehouse loomed ahead, its towering structure casting long, foreboding shadows in the dim light of the street lamps. Inside, Marcus's operations were hidden from the world, masked by layers of secrecy and danger. Ethan knew that he wasn't just walking into a fight with Marcus, he was walking into the heart of the storm that had controlled Sophie's life for so long. Ethan took a deep breath, hands tight on the steering wheel. His thoughts were a whirlwind. Sophie was somewhere in there. Somewhere under Marcus's thumb. She was pregnant. Terrified, and had been fighting her own war in silence. She had wanted to protect him, to keep him away from all of this, but Ethan couldn't leave her. Not now, not after everything she'd gone through. He parked his car out of sight and approached the back entrance of the warehouse on foot. The night was unnervingly quiet, no sign of movement around him. The smell of rusted metal and oil filled the air, and the sharp screech of the door echoed as he pulled it open. Inside, the dim light flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows on the cold concrete floor. The place was a maze of corridors and hidden rooms, but Ethan knew he couldn't waste time trying to figure out its secrets. He had a single mission: find Sophie. As he moved deeper into the belly of the beast, his every step felt louder than the last. He'd made it this far, but there were no guarantees. The silence of the place was heavy, oppressive, but in it, Ethan could hear something else too, the unmistakable hum of danger. The encounter. Ethan's heart skipped a beat when he heard the sound of voices ahead, low murmurs mixed with the occasional laugh. He moved cautiously, staying in the shadows, careful not to draw attention. The voices grew louder as he neared the corner. Without thinking, he rounded the edge, only to find himself face to face with two men standing guard outside a large door. Both were armed, their hands resting near their holsters. They froze when they saw him. "Who the hell are you?" one of them barked, his hand instantly going to his weapon. Ethan's stomach churned, but he stood his ground. "I'm looking for Sophie. I'm here to speak with Marcus." His voice came out more forcefully than he expected, as though the words themselves carried weight. The guards exchanged a glance, and for a moment, Ethan thought they might shoot him on the spot. But then the second man, taller and with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. "What's your business with Marcus?" he demanded. "I have information. It's important." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Ethan said quickly, his words desperate but calculated. The two men exchanged another glance, and then the taller guard motioned toward the door. "All right. Get inside. Marcus will want to see you." Ethan barely had time to register the decision before the guards moved aside, their eyes narrowing on him as he passed. The door creaked open, and he stepped into the next room. Inside the lair. The room was dimly lit, but its stark, industrial design made it feel cold and hostile. The air was thick with tension. At the far end, behind a massive, polished desk, sat Marcus. His presence was imposing. He was a man used to power, a man who commanded without even trying. His sharp suit contrasted with the gritty surroundings, making him appear like a wolf dressed in sheep's clothing. Ethan's jaw tightened. For all the stories Ray had told him, this was his first real look at the monster behind the mask. But even so, Ethan wasn't afraid. He had a single purpose here. Sophie. Marcus looked up slowly, his piercing gaze meeting Ethan's with an almost indifferent amusement. Well, he said, his voice smooth like velvet but carrying a dangerous edge. "I didn't expect you to be so eager." Ethan stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Where's Sophie?" His voice was sharp, full of raw emotion. "I know what you're doing. Let her go." Marcus chuckled darkly, leaning back in his chair. "You think you can just walk in here and demand things from me? You think you can walk away from this?" His eyes narrowed. "This is a game, Ethan. And you're not the player. You're just a pawn." Ethan's pulse quickened. "I'm done playing your games, Marcus. I'm here for Sophie. If you think I'm going to let you use her," he was cut off by Marcus's cold laughter. "Sophie," Marcus said, his lips curling into a smirk. "She was always too weak, too afraid to understand the bigger picture. But I'm not just using her, Ethan. I'm giving her an opportunity, one she'll never get again." "Opportunity?" Ethan spat, stepping closer. "You're threatening her life. You think that's some kind of gift?" Marcus didn't flinch. He looked almost amused by Ethan's anger. "You still don't understand. Sophie was never meant to be some innocent girl hiding in the shadows. She's part of something much bigger than you, than both of us. And now, with her condition," he gestured vaguely at Sophie's pregnancy, his smile widening. "Well, let's just say I have a new kind of leverage." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Don't you dare," he growled, fury rising in his chest. Marcus finally stood, his tall frame looming over Ethan. "You're too late," he said quietly, his voice like a whisper in the dark. "I already have her. And she will never leave me. She's mine." For a moment, Ethan was frozen, the weight of the words pressing down on him. He had come so far, and yet, Marcus was still one step ahead. Sophie, the woman he loved, was trapped. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Without thinking, Ethan lunged forward, shoving Marcus aside and rushing to the door that led deeper into the building. He heard Marcus's laughter behind him, cold and mocking, but he didn't care. His mind was fixated on one thing: finding Sophie. The final showdown. The corridor was eerily quiet, but Ethan could hear the distant sound of footsteps approaching. He didn't have much time. The door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar, and through the crack, he could see Sophie sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, looking pale and exhausted. His heart pounded as he approached. "Sophie," he whispered urgently, pushing the door open. She looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Ethan? What are you doing here?" Her voice was hoarse, fragile. "I came for you," he said, rushing to her side. "We need to leave. Now." But just as Ethan reached for her, the door slammed shut behind him. He spun around to find Marcus standing there, flanked by several armed men. "You're too late, Ethan," Marcus said, his tone icy. "You really thought you could take her from me?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll fight you, Marcus. I'll fight until the end." Marcus's eyes gleamed with malice. "You have no idea what you're up against." But as the men began to move toward him, Ethan knew something. He had no more fear. No more hesitation. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The moment where the fight would end. Without warning, the room erupted into chaos. Guns were drawn, and men rushed at Ethan, but he fought back with every ounce of strength he had. He dodged, kicked, and fought with a fury that surprised even him. Sophie screamed, but he couldn't stop. As the last man fell to the ground, Ethan turned to Marcus. "You won't win," he said, breathing heavily. Marcus's eyes were full of rage, but he backed off, realizing he was defeated. He turned toward the door, muttering under his breath, "This isn't over." Ethan turned to Sophie, his face filled with relief and determination. "It's over. You're safe now." Epilogue. Ethan and Sophie left the black hole together. The sun was beginning to rise, and for the first time in months, Sophie felt like she could finally breathe again. Though they had won, there was still so much ahead of them. But for now, they were free. Free from the shadows of Marcus and the danger that had consumed their lives for so long. And in that moment, as they walked away from the darkness, they both knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together.